Have you ever wondered if your neighbor's clipboard could turn into a weapon sharper than any knife? What if the woman preaching community standards was the one smashing every real law in the book while smiling like a saint? And what if the quiet guy she picked on had been watching her every move, waiting for the exact moment she'd hang herself with her own rules? Let me pull you into the rolling hills just outside Willow Creek Estates, where every lawn is manicured like it's auditioning for a magazine cover and every mailbox shines like a trophy-wives convention. My little patch of land sits 3 miles beyond their gilded gates, a simple farm where I, Jack Thompson, figured retirement would mean bees buzzing, honey dripping, and zero drama. Wrong. Karen Voss ran that HOA like it was her personal kingdom. She didn't enforce rules. She breathed them, ironed them, probably whispered sweet nothings to them at night. For weeks her letters arrived in that perfect cursive that somehow felt like a slap. Your apiary constitutes an odorous asset negatively impacting shared property value ecosystems. Translation: my bees buzzed too loud, and my honey tasted like actual freedom instead of approved beige. She'd creep along my fence snapping photos, petitioning the county, telling neighbors my colorful birdhouses were visually disruptive and could tank resale values by a catastrophic 0.5%. The woman had color-coded spreadsheets for her spreadsheets. I laughed at first. You kind of have to when someone calls your honeybees a public health crisis. But people like Karen don't laugh back. They double down. They sharpen their pens into spears and start a whisper campaign that spreads faster than cheap gossip at a PDA meeting. Suddenly, I'm the neighborhood villain. That Jack guy? Total nuisance. Anti-community. Shady in that barn. I kept my mouth shut, nodded politely when her white Range Rover cruised past, but inside my 30-year cop radar was screaming. A month earlier, my old partner, now chief, had sat on my porch with a beer and a serious face. Jack, these HOA clowns are bullying families into selling cheap so developers can cash in. Extortion dressed up as aesthetic standards. We need eyes they won't suspect. Someone harmless. So I became the perfect decoy, the quiet bee farmer in faded overalls. My barn wasn't just for hives anymore. It was wired with hidden cameras and stacked with sealed evidence boxes feeding straight to the department. Every complaint, every threat, every for sale from Willow Creek was being logged for the bigger case. Fraud, intimidation, the whole rotten pie. That night at 12:15 a.m. Metal crying as bolt cutters chewed through my front gate lock. I sat in the dark kitchen, hands around a cooling mug of coffee, and thought, yep, they finally did it. In these quiet parts of America, the silence before chaos feels alive, like the land itself is holding its breath right before the world tilts. My gut whispered, this isn't curiosity. This is invasion with a side of superiority complex. I wasn't shocked. A sedan casing my place for days. Different drivers, same dead-eyed stare. Patterns don't retire when you do. So when flashlights jittered up my driveway like nervous ghosts, I simply stepped onto the porch barefoot, mug still warm, looking for all the world like a man who'd wandered out to admire the moon. There she stood, Karen Voss, blonde helmet hair untouched by humidity or humility, leather folder clutched like the Constitution she'd personally rewritten. Behind her, Derek, her hired security, built like a gym bro who practiced intimidation in the mirror. The Range Rover idled like a throne on wheels. Mister, she trilled, voice pitched high enough to shatter egos. We're here for a mandatory property inspection in accordance with Willow Creek's jurisdictional extension policies. For the greater good of the community, of course. I took a slow sip. Cut my lock at midnight with bolt cutters. That's not an inspection. Delusion, and served with a smile. Derek stepped forward, jaw clenched like he'd practiced the move. Open the gate, or we access by force. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped, dry, soul deep. Buddy, you already accessed by force. Welcome to the party. My motion lights flared on, the ones I placed not for coyotes, but for exactly this brand of suburban theater. Derek's eyes darted. The rabbit suddenly realized the trap might have teeth. Karen lifted her chin like a swan who'd paid extra for neck privileges. You are in violation of Code Section 4.2 on aesthetic harmony and odor neutrality. I raised one hand, calm as Sunday morning. No, Karen, something a lot bigger than cul-de-sac commandments. And right now you're writing the evidence yourself. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, the short vibration that only came from the chief. Let them commit. Cameras rolling. I smiled into my coffee like it suddenly tasted like justice with 2 sugars. They fanned out like they owned the dirt under my feet. Derek pushed past me into the house like he was breaching a cartel bunker, hand hovering over a concealed holster. He clearly wanted me to notice. Karen stayed by the gate directing traffic like a general in Lululemon. I just stood there, mug steaming gently, heart steady, breathing the kind of calm that only comes from 3 decades of walking into real danger. Not this HOA cosplay militia nonsense. Inside, boots thudded across hardwood. Drawers opened. They weren't inspecting. They were hunting for anything they could twist into justification. Funny thing about people who hunt for guilt instead of truth, they always think they've found it. Karen leaned in, voice syrupy. It would be easier if you simply cooperated, Mr. Thompson. I leaned on the porch rail, took another sip, and looked at her like she was reciting lines from a script written by someone who'd never faced a real problem. Oh, I am cooperating. Statement in permanent marker. Confusion flickered across her Botox-smooth face for half a heartbeat before she painted it over with that signature HOA president smile, the one they practice right before they fine you for an enthusiastic lawn gnome. But I saw the tiny crack. Stared into hundreds of faces deciding whether to lie, run, or fight. She wasn't here for property values. She was here for control, and beneath that, for the quiet cash that came from forcing sales. The radio on Derek's belt crackled. A civilian would catch, but my old instincts lit up like Christmas. Team 2 at barn. Proceeding to interior. They were all in now. No, we just got lost story that could save them. And then, soft at first but growing, the sirens started their low, patient hum in the distance. One of Karen's hired men flinched at the sound, the tiny twitch of someone who just realized they might be the villain in someone else's story. Karen didn't flinch, pride pumping like oxygen. You're resisting improvement of the community experience, she snapped, voice shaking just enough to betray her. I laughed, the tired kind that comes from deep disappointment. Lady, you came to a man's home at midnight with bolt cutters, fake badges, and a PowerPoint. That's not improvement. Wearing delusion as cologne. Inside the house, something metal clanged. They'd reached the hallway closet, access panel to the barn feed. They thought they were about to strike gold, maybe drugs, guns, something they could plant and parade on the evening news. See, we were right to come. They had no idea what actually waited in that barn. Active case files, federal-level evidence storage, direct live feed to the department. Every boot step they took was another felony stacked like kindling. Derek burst back out, breathing heavy, adrenaline turning to dread at the edges. There's a locked area back there, he told Karen, eyes wide. Probably hiding something big. Karen's eyes lit up like she'd found buried treasure in a sandbox. Open it. Everything. Derek nodded like he was in a movie. Slow, deliberate, ceramic onward like a judge's gavel. You cut that lock, I said, voice low and final, the tone that once made armed men hand over weapons without blinking. And your whole world changes in ways you're not ready for. He hesitated just a breath, long enough to show the truth landed. Then he raised the crowbar. That's when the floodlights exploded across the yard. White, merciless, unforgiving. Red laser dots danced over the driveway like angry stars waking up. A helicopter thundered overhead, rotor wash whipping dust and Karen's perfect hair into a tornado of chaos. The bullhorn cracked the night open. Police. Step back and drop everything. Derek froze mid-swing, crowbar suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. Karen's jaw dropped so fast her clipboard slipped and clattered like the sound of her empire cracking. The hired men staggered as black SUVs poured from the tree lane. Real uniforms, trained, efficient, no cosplay, moved in where pretend authority had played king for too long. Through the glare walked Chief James Anderson, calm as a man who'd waited months for this exact moment. He didn't shout, and gave the smallest nod, like two old dogs who still knew every trick. "Jack, you good?" I shrugged like we were talking about the weather. Then he turned to Karen, and the softness vanished. "Karen Voss, you and your associates are under arrest for criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit fraud, property intimidation schemes, and attempted breach of a protected evidence facility." Karen blinked like the word evidence was in a foreign language. "Evidence? We were just enforcing rules." "I have jurisdiction." I stepped forward, voice quiet but carrying. "You had arrogance." Handcuffs clicked like punctuation on a story that had been written the moment she picked up those bolt cutters. As they loaded her into the cruiser, hair wild, mascara running like justice had applied its own war paint, she stared at me through the glass. Shock, rage, disbelief all melting into one raw realization. She hadn't lost by accident. She'd lost because she never knew who she was actually fighting. The sun wasn't up yet, but the sky had that silver hush right before dawn. Karen sat in the back seat, mouth tight, trying to cling to whatever dignity she thought she still owned. Watching her in that cramped cage felt strange. Not fireworks and cheering satisfaction, just a deep, quiet rightness. Like a bent fence finally snapping back into place. One officer walked Derek past me, wrists bound, head down. He didn't look angry anymore. "Didn't have to trap us," he muttered. I held a stare. "And you dragged innocent people with you." Karen kept staring. Suits or HOA bylaws or divine suburban rights. Instead, she whispered something I barely caught. "You ruined everything." But she never understood what everything really was. She'd built her life like an HOA rulebook, appearance over substance, control over community, power over peace. That ruins things long before the handcuffs arrive. The yard emptied of flashing lights, replaced by morning fog and the first lazy crow calling from the tree line. My phone started buzzing, neighbors texting support, an old friend offering to fix the gate, a lawyer saying the dominoes were falling and this would change HOA statewide. I walked the property line out of habit, checking the fence where they'd cut, the barn door they'd spray-painted in panic. The tomatoes weren't the point anymore. The point was the land itself fighting back with truth, patience, and old-fashioned refusal to bow. I poured fresh coffee, leaned on the railing, and looked out over the acres that had refused to surrender. Sometimes peace feels like a whisper after a hurricane. I turned to the porch camera, the one I'd set up for days exactly like this, and spoke to whoever might be listening. "Listen, if someone spends their life trying to shrink yours because your bees don't match their beige vision, don't let them. Stand your ground. Stay decent. Bullies don't break strong people. They expose themselves trying." The land was quiet again. Personal note: bullies with clipboards think they own the world, but real power comes from patience and truth. Stand your ground smartly and watch the entitled fall. Don't let anyone turn your home into their kingdom. Peace isn't given, it's defended.